Just to piggyback off a little bit on what Dr. Gilbert just mentioned, I've had the great opportunity to practice as a behavior analyst with Crystal Mind for 7 years now, a little bit over 7 years now. And in my time, I've had the opportunity to assess behavior, not only assess behavior, but also identify areas of deficit and create skill acquisition lessons in many different areas, including language, social skills, cognitive ability, daily living skills. And one topic of interest, and one common topic of interest would always be emotions. Till this day, being able to create lessons on emotions is something that I really enjoy, but it's also something that's very tricky, right? In order to create a lesson that's really going to translate, it could be very complex because emotions can be complex in nature. They're very subjective, right? And even when identifying the definition for this presentation on emotions, I came across several different definitions, right? And that just goes to show how subjective in nature it could be. What looks and feels one way for one person may not be the same for another, right? And on this next slide, we can see the definition that we went with was the Merriam-Webster's Medical Dictionary, which reads the following: emotions, a conscious mental reaction such as fear or anger, subjectively experienced as strong feeling, usually directed toward a specific object and typically accompanied by physiological and behavioral changes in the body. I wanted to focus a little bit on the physiological and behavioral changes in the body for a second. These are social cues that are associated with emotions, right? So if a person is happy, typically is represented socially through a smile, through laughter. If someone is in pain, and social cues for pain may be, wincing, or if they're in fear, then there's also social cues associated with that emotion, right? And later on in the presentation, we are going to touch on how social cues can really help us take advantage of situations that happen naturally and really use them as teaching opportunities. I like to look at emotions as everything happening inside the skin, right, per se. In applied behavior analysis, we consider these private events. And I actually wanted to include a character emotion chart where you can see here just, basic emotions, right? We have a lot of characters, and typically we have a label under each emotion, but we have several of them there that don't have a label. And I wanted to actually altogether, take the chance to see if we can identify the proper label for the ones that have a missing emotion. So let's give it a try. Let's go with that first one. We can unanimously say that that's a social cue. What he's representing there could be considered anger. But let's give the second one a try. So the second one can definitely be him feeling tired. The kiddo is bored, hungry, right? Also in the second row, that first one, she can be experiencing sadness. She can be worried. On the third row, third picture, she can also be considered worried. The expression on her face is a social cue for sadness, and could also be for sadness. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that if this is something that could be so subjective in nature for adults, and it could be something that is kind of difficult to really come to terms and agree on just one label for typically developing adults, then how it just shows how difficult it can be for a child diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder who may have deficits in social skills and being able to pick up social cues and gestures, right? So one thing that's important is going over how typically developing children learn, but also being mindful that children on the autism spectrum disorder have a unique way of learning, and that we should adjust the way we teach so they could really fit their learning. So let's talk a little bit about typical development. A typically developing child may learn to say, "I love candy," by simply watching adults say the same thing. Video modeling, television. I remember when I was a kid, even with language acquisition, my first language is Spanish, and I actually learned to speak English just through television, right? So, and I used to watch cartoons, and in cartoons, you'll see, silly things that happen, and they involve emotions. Someone being happy, a cartoon character getting hurt and experiencing pain and labeling it as pain. And that video modeling for me was sufficient, right? It was sufficient for me to make that association and that correlation. And typically that's how I learned not only about language acquisition, but emotions as well, and through play and peer interactions, right? We see a child who's eating ice cream and he's loving his ice cream, and we're seeing all the social cues, and has a face of enjoyment, and he's smiling and he's laughing and he's eating very fast and messy, and he's constantly saying, "I love this ice cream," and as typically developing individuals, we're seeing that, and we're making that association, right, between the emotion, the social cues, and everything that's going on, and really associating that with an emotion. So really like increasing the likelihood that the next time that I have an ice cream in my hand and I eat it, right, and I find that same sensation, that I'm going to associate that with what I saw. But for children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, as we know, sometimes in some cases there are areas of deficit, especially with social skills, right? So Dr. Ivar Lovas is a pioneer in the field of behavior analysis, and he actually has one quote that I wanted to share with you all today, just because I find it it's a very good quote. And he says, "If they can't learn the way we teach the way they learn." And I think this is very important. At times, some of the things that we do in applied behavior analysis may seem like it may be very, I've heard the word trained before, trained responses. But in reality, as typically developing children and individuals, we also learn in this very same way. It's just, it doesn't take situations to be contrived and created for us, or at least we don't need as many trials for them. So I think it's very important to be in tune with how our children learn, and being able to modify our teaching so that it fits their learning. And I also wanted to go about, before we touch on traditional ways of teaching emotions, I wanted to first talk about receptive language and expressive language. I know we have some behavior analysts here today. We have some parents that may be familiar with the terminology, but just to make everything very relatable, I really wanted to just go over it very quickly before we step into what the actual strategies are for teaching emotions. And when I refer to receptive language, it refers to the child understanding language, for example, following instructions. So I say, "Johnny, stand up," and Johnny is able to understand my words and follow the instruction. And as far as expressive language, it refers to the child using his own words to express him or herself, right? So if I show Johnny a picture and I ask him, "What is she doing?" he can use his words to express what's in front of him. So below you'll see some traditional ways of teaching emotions. And me personally, when I create my lessons, it involves a lot of this as well, along with some other things that we're going to be touching a little further into the presentation. So a typical lesson for teaching emotions may start with us first teaching receptively. So using a 2D format. 2D format meaning a picture. So we may have two pictures out, and we may ask Johnny, "touch sad," and Johnny's going to reach over and touch sad, right? And then we may run a couple trials of that, reinforce him, right? Present a reward for correct responding, and then we may move on to then teaching receptively, but identifying emotions in vivo, so meaning in person with individuals that are present, mom, dad. So it's basically running the same way we ran the receptive using the 2D format, the picture, but now it's with people that are present. So dad may be having a sad face, mom may have a neutral face, and I may ask, "Johnny, find sad," or "who's sad?" And then he may go and reach over to dad, right? And then the next step would be to then start targeting expressive language, going back to using a 2D format. So using a picture, using a video, and now we're talking about expressive language. So now we want to create an opportunity where they're using their words to explain what's going on in the picture, what's going on in front of them, right? So I can show them a picture, and then I would be asking, "What is the boy feeling?" Right? And then Johnny is now to use his words to explain what he sees. And then finally, we would teach expressive language, but now we would do so in a way where they're labeling emotions in vivo with people in front of them, people that are present at the time. And, mom may be, smiling, and then I may ask, how is she feeling? And then Johnny is now expressively to explain what he sees with his words. And I think this, for the most part, when it comes to lessons on teaching emotions, this is what a lot of the early parts of the lessons look like. But I think an area where we feel like at times we get stuck is, transitioning from there on over to teaching what's really inside of the skin, what they feel as well. And the way I like to look at this is, we're teaching everything that's going on in the world, but we're missing the part where we're teaching what they're feeling inside of their skin. How can they make that association between what they saw on a picture, on a table, and out in front of them, and how can they create association between that and what's actually going on within themselves, right? So I think that's where we have to get creative. Sorry about that. So, and when I mean generalization, I mean I'm really trying to promote the skills that we're teaching in a learning center or in a teaching center, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, and really trying to apply those lessons for them to be able to really make that association with emotions and what they really feel inside, right? So a typical way to teach emotions may be first teaching receptively using a 2D format. So just a picture, right? So kind of like the ones that I've been showing, right? So we'll hold up a picture. You can create an array of two, maybe this picture and another picture, and then asking receptively, right? So again, this is like providing or placing a demand with instruction for the child to identify happy. So show me happy, right? Or point to the one that's sad, right? So the child would then proceed to select the correct answer. And that's them identifying the emotion, right? And then we teach the receptively to identify emotions in vivo. So that means in person with actual people that may be present, right? So we move away from the table, and now we have mom available. Now we have dad available. Mom may be making a sad face, and I may provide an instruction like, Johnny, find who's sad, or show me sad, right? And he may point to mom, and that would be a correct response for him identifying that emotion, right, in this particular way of teaching. And then we will move on to more expressive language, right? So that's, like we mentioned before, that's him using his words to express him or herself. And then also going back to using a 2D format. So that would be a picture. So now instead of asking the kiddo to identify which one is sad and which one is happy, we're going to ask, what is she feeling, right? So in this particular picture, for example, what is she feeling, right? So expressively using your words to tell me what's going on in the picture, right? And then finally moving again away from the 2D format and away from the table perhaps, and teaching expressive language in vivo and live with people, right? So we have kind of the same way we went about it receptively, we would go about it expressively, and we would say, how is mom feeling? How is dad feeling? They may be going through an emotion, or they may be laughing, right? And that's a perfect opportunity for us to ask the kiddo, how is she feeling, or how is he feeling? And if they're able to express that, then that would mean that they've mastered the ability to identify or use expressive language to identify these emotions, right? And I think one of the biggest limitations is that that's where, for the most part, that's where our teaching stops, right? So we're teaching what's going on outside of the world per se, on the outside world per se, but we're not teaching what's happening inside the skin, right? So most of our kiddos, what's happening is that they're taking in these lessons and they're seeing these lessons as tasks, right? So they're identifying the correct response, but they're not really making that association between what mom is showing and that gesture with what possibly they may be feeling, right? So I think that's where we need to break through. So I wanted to, I have two videos that kind of show what discrete trials, or what trials look like, teaching receptively and expressively. So I wanted to just go through them really quickly together and then see what you guys think. By the way, if I'm going too fast, and if you want to participate, if you have any questions in between, please feel free to jump in, unmute yourself. Let me see if I can figure out the chat, because I know the chat's been a little tricky for me, but I would definitely suggest unmuting yourself if you want to jump in. But let me start with this first video. Let's jump to this part.
Ice cream stick, pop stick. You make smileys like this and you go and match the smileys. See? Excited. You fix it here. Very good. Excited. Next.
Yes.
Happy. See? Amma is going to fix happy. Happy. Next, you are going to fix the correct one, okay? See? Amma is taking sad. You take sad. Sad face.
So we just wanted to pause it really quickly. Her instruction there was, you take sad, or that would be the equivalent of you find sad, right? And on the carpet, there were two different faces. So that's basically the same as doing the trial that we talked about with a 2D format with two pictures, right? So we're still targeting the same thing, receptive language.
Very sad face, sad. Fix it here. Sad, yeah. Angry. You fix angry. Angry. See? Angry. Sad. Happy. One another method is, see, like you made like this. Chart paper and stick. Then we fix papers and we make eye. How is he feeling? He is feeling sad. Next.
So I find this particular activity a very clever way of adding to what she was already teaching. And I think the goal a lot of times when we have a lesson like this is to try to be able to provide a lesson where the child is able to apply what they learned about emotions and really being able to show you what these emotions are. And although that may be the goal, and I love the activity, however, the child being able to show you what a sad face looks like doesn't really create correlation between that and what he feels and what sadness feels like, right? So I think that's where our lessons need to be altered a little bit, just to promote that connection and that association. Let's just see a couple more seconds of this one, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Next. How is he feeling? He's angry. Next. This is emotional cards. Happy. Yeah, he's happy. Next. How he is feeling.
Okay, so now let's move on to this one. We'll watch a couple seconds of this one, and then we'll move on to our next slide. This one is also going to be about, receptive language. This is more with a 2D format, how we discussed. And she also does move on over to teaching expressive language at one point, and we'll see it now.
Touch angry.
Angry.
What's angry? Touch angry. Yeah, you got it. Okay. Touch excited. Awesome. High five. Okay. Can I have it? Thank you. Oh, is it nice? Okay. Ready? Eyes on me. Touch your cards, and I want you to tell me what emotion it is, okay? Ready?
Yep.
Eyes on me. How does she feel?
I'm scared.
Scared. Awesome.
And
How does she feel?
I know she felt mad,
She feels sad.
sad.
Okay.
Why
Nice
she
try.
sad?
So he went with mad, and that's a valid answer. You know, I mean, it did look like she could be upset. And these strategies and this way of going about teaching emotions is very very effective. I mean, I use them in my current programs, um, in conjunction with what we're going to be touching on next, which is really to be able to promote that generalization. So, what are the limitations here? Let's see. Let's move on to our next slide. And like we mentioned, the lessons aren't generalizing. We are teaching what's going on out in the world. We're not accounting for what's going on inside. And this reminds me of teaching. I'm sorry, right? So I've seen this, throughout my time as a behavior analyst and as a parent as well, being with my son and being with his peers. And we have a kiddo, they'll behave in a certain way that warrants them apologizing, and we prompt them to say I'm sorry, right? And the child is repeating echoically, they're repeating what we told them to basically say, but they're not really experiencing remorse, embarrassment, or guilt, or the emotion. Those are the emotions tied to that, to that term, saying sorry. So I think, what can we do? What can we do to create lessons that are more relatable for our kiddos, right? And one of the things that is crucial is being able to capture moments and being able to make use of these opportunities that naturally present themselves, right? So in applied behavior analysis, we call them incidental teaching opportunities, right? These are opportunities that occur, and we have to be able to capture these moments and use that opportunity to teach the child what he or she may be experiencing, right? So one thing that's super important, I think this goes back to the definition that we originally had on the first slide, is the social cues, right? The collateral behavior really refers to social cues and those signs of what may be going on with that person, right? So if someone is eating very fast, right? They're eating ice cream very fast. It may be because they enjoy it, they like it, and something that we can say as therapists, as parents, to that particular child could be, "I love ice cream," right? We can literally have that, say that to the child, and them associate that what they're eating is associated with something that they like, with enjoyment, and perhaps being able to understand what loving to eat ice cream is, right? Another example would be, a social cue of someone, laughing, right? We have a kiddo that it's enjoying something that he's watching, right? And he's laughing something on his tablet. And us as parents or as therapists using that opportunity that's presenting itself naturally to really, teach that's something that's funny, and that funny is related to you expressing yourself in that way and laughing, right? So, my kiddo is watching something off the tablet, and I see that social cue of him laughing, and I can step right in and say, "That's funny," right? I'm happy, right? So I would want to ideally teach the child what he's feeling, not what I'm feeling, right? So, and I think that's also a very crucial point to make, is that, and this, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit here, but this kind of reminds me of an example that I have of one of my kiddos that I work with. And it's important for us to teach what they're feeling, right? So I have one kiddo that when I started working with him, every time he would fall, the first thing he would say was, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So that was like his reaction to his falls, right? And it was because every time that he would fall, mom, obviously a caring parent, first thing that she would come in and say is, "Are you okay?" Like, "Oh no, are you okay?" And he associated, okay, when I fall and when I'm hurt, I express it in this way, right? And typically developing children, typically developing adults learn in this way as well. It just doesn't take, our learning processes are different. And the way we learn is different from perhaps how a child diagnosed with autism disorder is learns, right? So like we go back to the quote from earlier, we teach the way they learn, right? So they learn by making these associations. We have to contrive situations to really create opportunities for them, right? So, the kiddo that I work with falls every time, and every time he falls, he says, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" When his stomach hurts, working, we're having a session, and he may not be feeling well, he starts, randomly, you start seeing the social cues, the facial expressions start to change, and then he may say, are you okay? Are you okay? So that's an indicator that he's probably experiencing pain and he's not feeling well. And that's why I feel it's so important to capture moments where we can use incidental teaching opportunities, things that happen naturally, to really teach the child what he may be feeling or what she may be feeling, right? Being able to be aware of these social cues. I want to also do a little activity. No, not activity. I have a question, a scenario here on the top right, and really see what you guys think. So it reads, which of the following would describe a naturally occurring opportunity to teach about emotions? Right. So A says, sit facing the child and have him repeat cold 10 times in a row. B says, as a child takes a handful of ice out of the freezer, saying, wow, that's cold, and try to have the child repeat that phrase. C says, show a 2-year-old a video of a polar bear in the snow and say, it's cold. And D, throw a child into a snowdrift and ask how you feel. Let's not do that. Let's not do D, and let's not pick D, please. So it's not D for sure. A, B, or C. Let me know what you guys think. So I have one for B, another one for B. Okay. Absolutely, yeah. So I think we can all agree that B is an opportunity where it presented itself naturally, and the parent, the therapist, the teacher use that opportunity to teach what is cold, right? We can also use that opportunity to teach pain, right? So if it's holding ice, it's probably going to be uncomfortable. He's going to feel some type of discomfort after a while, and we can say, ouch, that hurts, right? Or yeah, that hurts, it's pain, right? And he starts associating, every time I feel that type of discomfort, that must be what pain feels like, right? And that being able to create these opportunities and capture these opportunities, I think really goes a long way, along with what we saw in the previous slides of the trials, with them being able to use 2D formats and getting creative with, how we saw the sticks with the different emotions, right? But these opportunities where they're actually feeling that is really what ties everything together. Along with, how are we feeling so far about the information? How do you guys
Hi,
think about
hi.
that?
I do have a question. This is Jamie Monteroso. I wanted to know if we have some kiddos who are sensory or have sensory aversions and are more visual learners, why would C not be an opportunity to have, a natural opportunity to teach emotion? Why would choice C, showing them a video of a polar bear in snow and saying birds cold, if they are more visual learners, and if they have sensory type of aversions?
They have sensory type of aversions. Okay, well, that's a great question. I think for me to be able to answer that question, I would have to know a little more information. But I would say that watching the video is also teaching about what's going on the outside world, right? They're in that point in time, they're not experiencing either cold or they're not experiencing any type of discomfort. So if we have a child that is sensitive and has self-stimulatory behavior, for example, or has sensitivity to different stimuli, then we can create opportunities for him. There are going to be opportunities that present themselves just because he has sensitivities, where we can teach discomfort, where we can teach pain, not necessarily through a video. A video would be great for a lesson related to what we previously saw, which was teaching about the outside world, right? But with the child with a child who has sensitivities, then perhaps we have to capture a moment where the social cues that he's displaying go in hand with him possibly feeling discomfort. In this example, we were talking about cold, but in the example with the kiddo, he may be feeling disgust, right? Because there may be sensitivity to a texture. It may be like he may be a picky eater, right? So these are all situations that are also going to present themselves. And if they're happening naturally, then we can use that moment to teach what he may be feeling.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? See, I don't have anything on the chat. Okay, perfect. Let's move on to our next slide. So yeah, just to piggyback a little bit off on what we just covered, he may need you to tell him what he's feeling before he can tell you what he's feeling, right? So definitely using those opportunities that present themselves. The kiddo that I mentioned in my example, you know, he would always say, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So I started to pair, "Ouch, that hurts," or "I don't like that," with moments that were similar to a discomfort or pain. And little by little, I think he started to make that association. But it's definitely crucial to do that. What else can we do aside from being able to capture um, incidental opportunities? We can also create situations, right? We can induce these feelings and use that as an opportunity, because incidental teaching, although is very important and very key, how often does it really happen, right? So you're kind of limited as to how many times you can provide that teaching moment, right? But there are some opportunities where you can create with some emotions. We can create and almost duplicate that emotion and really create a situation where we can contrive the situation and present him with an opportunity to teach him what he may be feeling. And that's what we're going to see on the next slide. So just to piggyback a little bit off on what I just said, to contrive situations and create the emotion in order to then provide information on what they may be feeling, right? So here on one of the bullets I say, let's take a look at a previous slide. I just basically wanted to go over the basic emotions, right, that you see down here on the right: happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, surprise. And how can we create these and induce these emotions, right? Ethically also, right? Without creating harm, without putting a child in discomfort, right? Purposely, because ethically that may not be okay. So with happiness, I think it's pretty, that would be pretty straightforward if we've been able to assess what are the things that are reinforcing to the child, what does he enjoy, if he has a preferred toy, a preferred tablet, right? And we're presenting it, we're creating that opportunity, right? We're presenting them to something that is very preferred, and we're being on the lookout for the social cues. He's laughing, he's smiling. He may be engaging in self-stimulatory behavior, right? We also see that sometimes when the child is overwhelmed, in a good way, and he may start engaging in self-stimulatory behavior. And that's a perfect opportunity to step in and tell the child what he may be feeling, right? I think as behavior analysts, a lot of times that we see, many times we see self-stimulatory behavior, and our instinct is to come in and really try to interrupt, try to teach a more appropriate way to express that emotion. And we forget to really use that opportunity to first teach the child what he may be feeling, right? So I think one of our roles as behavior analysts is to really identify alternatives, right? A more appropriate alternatives for behaviors that we consider to be problematic in nature, right? So self-stimulatory behavior at times socially could be stigmatized, and it's one of those behaviors where when me and my experience working with parents, we often want to modify this behavior, or I find that the parents often want to modify this behavior. And our role as a behavior analyst is to come in and find different ways to teach other behaviors that are going to compete with that behavior. If the child enjoys, to hand flap when he sees something that is rewarding to him and nice to him and he likes it, then my job is to try to find something that is more socially acceptable, something that is more appropriate in nature, and teach him that during those moments. But instead, I feel like it would be very helpful if we can, before stepping in and trying to redirect that behavior and shape that behavior, we can step in first and teach the child about what he's feeling in that point in time, right? If he's engaging in a self-stimulatory behavior, oh, you're happy, you're excited, you're having fun, right? And then when we start to include other type of alternatives, and we start associating that with the same label, then it increases the likelihood of them being able to really associate it to, okay, this also makes me happy, or this can also make me happy and make me feel this way, right? With another example would be with disgust. How can we create a lesson and create a situation where we're going to put the child in an area or a situation where he's going to feel disgusted, right? Ethically, is that okay? If we're working, let's say, for example, on food sensitivities, you know, a child is sensitive to a certain texture, and we want to try a different food, and he tries, let's say, for example, blueberry, and you see the social cues, his face, facial expressions, right? Us presenting that blueberry that we know is non-preferred, we know it's something that he doesn't really enjoy, we can create that opportunity there to teach, oh, you don't like it. Or you can say, tell him directly, I don't like it, for him to repeat it and say, I don't like it. It increases the likelihood in the future for them to say, I don't like it, or I'm disgusted, right? And again, although this seems very, very methodical and very almost like trained behavior, in reality, with typically developing adults, that's how we learn as well. But as we mentioned earlier, it's just our way of learning is different. And perhaps for a typically developing individual, it doesn't take these trials and it doesn't take these associations, right? So for our children, we teach the way they learn. Now, I have an example here, similar to the one that I had in the previous slide. And for us to identify which one of these examples is us creating an opportunity to teach about emotions, right? So we have A, says, observe two kids fighting over a toy and say to them, I bet you're angry. B, read a book about the angry lion. C, while a child is happily playing with a toy, a teacher suddenly takes it away. Another teacher says, boy, that makes me angry, and prompts the child to repeat it. D, while a child is happily playing with a toy, a teacher suddenly takes it away. Another teacher says, give it back, please, and prompts the child to repeat. Let's give it a try and see what we got. Okay. We have A. I have someone who voted for A. What else do you guys think? Okay, I have one for C. C. We have D, okay. We have A, C, and D so far, okay. Let's talk a little bit about D. D says, while a child is happily playing with a toy, teacher suddenly takes it away. Another teacher says, give it back, please, and prompts the child to repeat. So what we're asking the child to repeat is give it back, right? So although this is an opportunity that is created because we are taking a toy away, in this particular example, by teaching the kiddo to say, give it back, we would be creating an opportunity for language acquisition. This is more of them teaching the child to request. In ABA, we consider this mands, right? So man training per se, but man, the ability to request. So if I want to target language acquisition, then this is definitely a situation that I can use to create that opportunity. The answer here would be C, just because the boy is, we're directing the boy to talk about what he's feeling, right? Inside his skin per se. Boy, that makes me angry is what he was prompted to say. And it increases the likelihood that that in the future, when he starts to feel what he's feeling at that point in time, when they take away something that he really enjoys, it increases the likelihood that he makes that association and says, you know, okay, this is what angry feels like, right? Of course, repeated exposure and repetition, I think, is what really helps in skill development. But in terms of creating an opportunity, C would be the most correct answer. I think we also have, I think we have A. We had someone vote for A. Observe two kids fighting over a toy and say to them, I bet you're angry. Yeah, that would be also almost as we're discussing things that are happening outside in the outside world and not necessarily what's happening with him. So we're not prompting the kiddo to
I
say.
completely misread that. I thought it was the child that would have been fighting with somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
No worries, no problem. I think one thing that's super important to mention is to teach a contrasting emotion. It's super important to teach a contrasting emotion. So every time we create an opportunity to teach emotions, we need to teach what the contrasting emotion is, right? So if we're creating an opportunity for, let's say with the example with the C, right? Letter C that says we take the toy away and we prompt the boy to say that he's angry, you know, returning the toy to the kiddo may make him happy, right? So that's a perfect opportunity now to teach the difference between being angry and being happy. Oh, you're happy now. I'm happy, as we return the toy, right? And that creates another opportunity for learning, right? We're learning now what's angry, what's happy, and how to differentiate the two. Does that make sense?
I guess I just feel like C is so gruff. You just randomly take it away without, I don't know. I guess I see it from your perspective. I'm not an ABA, so it looks
Mean.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's the word.
absolutely.
It looks like you're doing something
Purposely.
and right, and purposely with a motive that doesn't seem to be what you would want a child to learn. And from my point of view or my perspective, whatever that is, I would probably be more like to wonder, why is it that we can't look for the opportunity instead of creating it in this sense?
Yeah,
We're
absolutely.
talking about hot and cold. I understand how that could be created because you're teaching, you know, a certain feeling or an emotion. In this case, I almost feel like you're making the child feel bad for no reason. You're just kind of, or you could also be teaching them, you can just grab something from somebody else. You know, I don't know.
Okay. I can see that. I can definitely see. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think with some of these behaviors, like happiness, for example, and I think, you know, that's one of those where we can create situations of happiness. Ideally, with some of these emotions, especially anger, right? So anger, or let's say anxiety, right? If we want to create a situation of anxiety, it's going to be, again, it's going to seem like we are almost putting the child in a situation where it's unfair, right? It's not okay to purposely put the child in a situation of anxiety. But then we also have some situations that could be hazardous, right? So as board behavior, you know, analysts, part of our role is to also be able to not only use practices that are effective and ethical, but also we're looking for the best interest in our kiddos, right? And moving, you know, down the line, if we have, let's say with the example of the letter C, and this, let's say that this boy has, aside from just not being able to differentiate between his anger and happiness, he also has a behavior of aggression, right? And this is going to be something that's problematic socially for him. In school, he's hitting others, he's biting, he's engaging in self-injury behavior, right? So I think it's almost more unethical to not teach the child how to manage that behavior and understand his aggression and
Makes sense.
when he's feeling it. Is almost more unethical to leave him that way than to not create a situation for him that could be uncomfortable, but to a lesser degree. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. It makes sense. Absolutely.
Okay. And let's move on to
Can I interject, Jonathan? I
yes,
just
of
want
course.
to add to what you were saying. I think you said it perfectly. However, just to bring up the point of, you know, these are moments that are going to happen naturally, for example, in a preschool setting, in a daycare setting, and to add on and piggyback to what the lady was saying earlier, you don't really have to contrive those opportunities, and they will happen naturally. And you know, I've experienced it myself where, like you said, it's setting them up for failure if you don't practice. For example, if you were just in the home setting, you would have to do that because there aren't any other peers that are going to take those toys from them. And I can tell you, for example, even today, an experience I had with a little one where it had to do with just transitioning from preferred items and getting very emotional and tantruming. And now thinking back, you know, I should have used the opportunity to ID emotions and label it for him. But what I wanted to just kind of like get your feedback on is, and I think I have the answer for it, but like in those moments, would you just wait until the child calmed down? Because anything you say is, they're not going to hear it. And
In
then
moments of aggression, like if in the example, we're going back to the example of the letter C.
no, I'm just saying in general, like
Yeah.
if your client is like in the midst of a tantrum, you would wait and then kind of like reflect with your client and say, oh boy, you know, that you were really upset or you were really sad there. Because you know, tantrums can last, and if it can feel like, oh my goodness, like let's move on, but
Absolutely,
like you're really
absolutely.
going through it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And with anger is one of those emotions that, you know, as behavior analysts, we're trying to identify, you know, alternatives, right? And we're looking to teach coping skills, for example. So if I have a child that is engaging he's angry and he's engaging in self-injury behavior, he's screaming, loud vocalizations, and I have a coping, you know, I've identified coping skills as a lesson for him or as a program for him that's going to help him by deep breathing, right? Um, I do want to get to the point where we start working on our coping skills, the programs that we've identified for him, but I also want to use that opportunity to teach him that the reason why we're doing the coping skills is because he's angry, right? So it's like, you're upset, I'm upset, right? So he's starting to engage in his behavior and his tantrum, using that opportunity to say, I'm upset. You know, I have one particular kiddo who, when he's denied access to his preferred toys, he starts to engage in self-injury behavior. And obviously we're going to go in there and response block, right, to avoid it becoming a hazardous situation. But I'm always using that opportunity when I see the behavior start to rise and I see the social cues already, his facial expression starts to change, that I start to use that moment to teach, I'm upset, and he'll say it with me. He'll say, I'm upset, right? I'm upset. So then I'll maybe do it once or twice, and then I'll get right into my coping skills, right? Whether it's, you know, we're doing deep breathing, we're doing a deep breathing board. I have a visual with deep breathing icons where he can see that he has to take deep breaths. And that goes into, that goes into a different topic about, you know, just coping skills and finding appropriate alternatives. But I do use that moment to teach that emotion. I won't sit there and really run trials of it, because that may just escalate things even more. But I am going to use that opportunity to at least, you know, bring awareness to it, right? Oh, you're upset. I'm angry, right? And I would say it in that way. I would say I'm angry because I want to tell him what he's feeling. I don't want to tell him what I'm feeling, right? Or what I think he's feeling, right? I want to tell him exactly what he's feeling. I'm angry, and then he will likely to respond, I'm angry, I'm upset, right? Like I said before, with another program with the self-stimulatory behaviors, with anger is the same thing. In my opinion, I feel like the more we can start to teach them to make that association between I'm angry and the reason why I'm angry, I think that also helps and increases the likelihood of our replacement behaviors and the alternatives that we've selected, in this case, coping strategies. It increases the likelihood that that will be effective, right? Because it's like, okay, I'm angry, so this is why I'm doing this, because I'm angry. When I'm angry, I do this, I do the deep breathing, right? Instead of, you know, he's angry, upset, and I'm just shoving, you know, the deep breathing board in his face, and he's like, okay, now I'm angry, and now you're making me do something else. It's like, it's too much now. So I definitely use those opportunities to teach that. I hope that answers your question. And it was a little bit of a long explanation, but I hope that answers your question. But yeah, not sitting there with him and really running trials of, you know, I'm angry until he repeats it. That's going to be obviously problematic, but definitely not allowing that opportunity to go to waste and not using it to teach emotions. All right. So again, some of the key factors for teaching private events. Private events, again, is what we feel inside of our skin, right? So functional communication skills and frequent feedback from adults, right? So I think functional communication skills is super important as a prerequisite skill, right? Whenever we want to teach emotions, we first want to make sure that we have a functional communication system going, right? Whether it doesn't have to necessarily be verbal. And verbal is a term that in ABA, it not only refers to vocalizations, but it talks about picture exchange, right? That's also verbal behavior per se in ABA. But for the sake of this presentation, let's talk about just communications and communication skills in general, right? We want to make sure that we have a system set up for our kiddo where they can communicate, where we have, whether it's through signs and sign language, whether it's through pointing and gestures, whether it's through picture exchange. We have a communication system, right? And this is something that we should have in place, and it should be almost like a prerequisite before we going into teach identifying emotions, right? And learning about emotions. Again, incidental teaching opportunities that present themselves naturally. I think this is the most important, the most important aspect of the learning of emotions, is using those opportunities that naturally present themselves, right? And like you mentioned with the preschool setting, yeah, they do happen a lot, but then we also have kiddos that are, in later grades, or we have kids that are homeschooled, we have kiddos that are only having therapy at home. And there are going to be opportunities that do present themselves there, but then we can also have other opportunities where we create opportunities ourselves and use that as an opportunity to teach. And always teaching contrasting emotions, right? We're teaching happy, we're also teaching sad, right? And with anxiety, I know I touched on anxiety really quickly, and nervousness. In a school setting, there may be situations where there's a situation that presents itself where the child may feel anxious or nervous. And these could be nervousness and anxiety could be a precursor to aggression, could be a precursor to self-injury behavior, could be things that happen prior to a maladaptive behavior per se. But there are ways to create an opportunity. Let's say we're working at home, to teach anxiety or nervousness or feeling antsy, right? So I'll give you a quick example. With one of the kiddos that I work with, I use timers. I use timers often, and I use timers to allow him to visually see when he's going to have access to his preferred toys, right? So the timer represents either access to preferred toys, or it represents now being presented with something that perhaps is non-preferred, like perhaps identifying emotions, right? Like some of the activities that we saw in the earlier videos, where that may not be as preferred. So as the timer is going, let's say I have a 3-minute timer going, and it's something that he's earned, right? He's earned, it's a scheduled break. As he sees the timer going, right, you start to see the social cues, right? So he starts to get antsy. He may start engaging in the self-stimulatory behavior, right? So those are opportunities there as the timer's coming to an end for me to say, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, right? And him expressing that. Again, we always want to teach contrasting emotions. So one thing that I could do proactively, I can pause the timer, reset the timer, allow him to continue having access to his preferred item or activity. And now his social cues may be different. Now he may be excited. Now he may be happy. We may crack a smile, right? And that could be an opportunity now that I created to teach the contrasting emotion, which is happiness, calm, right? The opposite of anxiety would probably be feeling calm, feeling happy, feeling content, right? And that could be an opportunity there for me that I created to teach emotions. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
No problem. And I believe that was the end of our presentation. What time? We have 4 minutes left, and I wanted to leave some time for some questions and some dialogue. And I know it was a lot of information there, but I would love to get some feedback on your thoughts and what you thought about overall what we covered. So please feel free to unmute yourself and participate if you'd like to. Let me stop share. All right. Great. So I'm reading a message from a little earlier in the chat. So that's a great point, Jonathan, and I agree with you, Xiomara. The more they're able to practice pairing the emotions felt with the word, the more they can use this to identify their emotions in the future. Absolutely. Thank you. I received a private message. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts, and really want to thank everyone for participating today, taking time from their Tuesday evening to really spend time here and really taking in this information and really and providing me with this opportunity. Thank you so much. I have another comment here in the chat section that says, I have used the deep breathing techniques, or at least trying with my son, and trying to incorporate how he's feeling. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jamie. It's a great webinar. Thank you so much. That was great, very informative. Thank you, Priya.
Jonathan, and I just want to kind of add something. I think it was, this was a really good webinar. And, apart from teaching, children on the spectrum to communicate their emotions, we should also be teaching every child, right, to communicate their emotions. I mean, I work in individual therapy with some adults that never learned, unfortunately, to communicate their emotions. And now they're, adults that experience this anger, but they have no idea where it's coming from. And it's like what I say, anger is like the secondary emotion, right? But they're not able to tell you, I feel sad, right? Because someone hurt me, or I feel nervous or anything like that. They just resort to anger, right? And then they start expressing it in maladaptive ways. So definitely this is a very important thing that I think every parent should teach their child, how to truly express and first identify those emotions.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. Thank you so much for your feedback as well. Let's see, I'm looking at the chat and I see another. Could you use desensitization for clients with sensory issues, then teach identifying emotions on how they feel? Let me see. So it's again, that's one of those questions where I would probably need to know more in order for me to really answer the question in a way that could be very helpful for you. But desensitization techniques and strategies are often used. And a lot of time, we see these with picky eaters, for example. We will see some desensitization techniques taking place. And yes, of course, we can use those opportunities to teach, like we mentioned, disgust and not enjoying something food, or saying like, I don't like it, right, as a feeling. So definitely we could use desensitization techniques to for sensory issues, without a doubt. D Mesa, watching from Texas, by the way. Jonathan has given some great tips with my son. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh yes, I know who D Mesa is. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much. Xiomara, when we create a situation, it also allows the opportunity to reinforce those responses. Absolutely, Xio. I agree. And just language acquisition in general, it just creates more opportunities for us to really push for that language.
I think there's a question by Uni about a teenager, or a comment, Morris.
Where? I'm sorry. Let me see.
So she says, I have a teenager under the spectrum, very high functional child. He deals with emotions, but unfortunately doesn't share it with his parents.
I have a teenager under the spectrum, very high functional child. Deals with. Okay. Uni. With a teenager, and that's also very typical behavior in teenagers, not only on the spectrum, but just typically developing teenagers, right? It's just so hard to, to get anything out of them, really. So I can definitely see how that's, that could be difficult. And I'm reading that he says he deals with emotions, but unfortunately he won't share with his parents. Yeah, so I definitely think, just being able to openly talk about emotions. And I would say, I think one of the keys there also would be, talking about emotions, not in those particular situations, is talking about emotions, not exactly perhaps when they're happening, but talking about them openly throughout. If we have, someone that's dealing with, sadness and anxiety, talking about them openly, especially with a teenager, so they feel like that trust and they feel like they're not being judged all the time, right? So just really creating that trust where they can talk about these emotions at any time. But again, it's one of those questions where I would love to have some more info so I can really, kind of guide you in the right direction. But generally, that's how we would want to go about it. So, create the situation also. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that everyone participated and everyone enjoyed the presentation. I would love to do it again for sure. Can social stories help those children that are not comfortable facing those emotions? I think social stories are great. I also think social stories are a way. I think some of the lessons that we saw earlier in the video is almost, it goes hand in hand with social stories and finding creative ways to teach what's going on, again, on the outside world, right? So me as a behavior analyst, I'm always looking for creative ways to teach emotions, and not only just emotions, but just skill acquisition in general, right? And social stories is one of those things that I use not only for emotions, but say, for example, for potty training, right? But when I'm using social stories and we are sitting, for example, in the living room, or we're sitting at the table during home therapy, using the social stories is effective. But I think what's really going to tie everything together is what we do when we're in the bathroom, right, where the behavior is actually taking place. So the social stories are always helpful, but definitely always capturing those moments, those naturally occurring moments, is also was really going to tie those emotions to what he's probably seen already in a social story, if that makes sense. You're welcome. Vanessa Suarez, what's the best approach to have when my son has a tantrum because he doesn't want to do a certain task? Vanessa, thank you so much for your question. And I really wish I could give you more information. I really would have to know some more in order for me to responsibly be able to answer that question. But I would really have, we would have to assess the behavior really. So I really wish I can give you some more information on that.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Okay, I have a toddler. He can list, or how would you say it? He knows the difference between different emotions. So if I put on a sad face, if I put on a happy face, he's 3, or an angry face, he can tell you, mom is angry, mom is, to other people, but for himself, he cannot express whether he is happy, whether he is sad. So would those be good opportunities? Let's say natural opportunities. What would be some great natural opportunities to have him vocalize that he is upset, or he is frustrated, or angry, sad, as opposed to just knowing when mom and dad or others are having an emotional response?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, that scenario that you're mentioning there, it really touches on everything that we went over today. And I think it's just, he's able to identify what's going on outside of his skin. And I like to use it, I like to use that very loosely, but what's going on in the outside world, but really was really going to tie everything together and really make that association between what he's already been taught about other people and others and what they may be feeling and what perhaps he's feeling, is when we use those opportunities that when he's feeling that, right? So if we're dealing with a toddler, then he may have a tough time. Obviously I don't know, your toddler, but I'm speaking very generally here. A toddler may have difficulty with turn taking, for example, or sharing, right? So if he's interacting with a peer and he's sharing something, right? And now, it's the other kiddo's turn and he takes it away, right? And he's not happy, he's upset, and he's feeling that emotion, then we definitely can have, that's a naturally occurring opportunity. If we have 2 kiddos play and there's only one toy, it's likely that one kiddo is going to take it away from the other, right? And there's going to be an opportunity there naturally occurring that we can step in and really tell our kiddo what he's feeling, right? And I think what's key there is telling them what they're feeling, right? Not what we're feeling, right? So we're not going to come in and say, oh, Johnny, you're upset. He took your toy. It's nice to share. That would be too much, right? So instead, we would step in there and say, I'm upset, right? Or, you're upset. Like, I don't want to say you're upset because then I'm telling him what he's feeling, but instead I want to just give him what he's feeling, right? So I'm upset. I don't want to share, right? For a toddler, that may be a lot, but basically the idea is telling him exactly what he's feeling and using that moment, right? So,
Okay, thank you. I get it.
welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so if that's all, I want to thank everyone again for joining us today and for the opportunity. And I hope to see you again on the next one, on the next presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Crystal Mine. Thank you, Monica. And
Thank you, Jonathan. Have a great evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And keep a lookout for our next webinar.
thank you. Good night.